Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you. Thank you for joining me for another spirit review video. Today we've got a great new line of tequilas to look at known as Expresiones del Corazón. Now this line is a brand new created line, very limited edition, and it is not using your typical Corazón Blanco as the base here. They actually created a brand new artisanal Blanco where they went to Tequila San Matias, the distillery up in the highlands of Jalisco, and sourced agave plants on their estate. Okay, so on their estate, they checked all the agaves that were ready, and they found the piñas that were either really, really sweet, maybe perhaps even sweeter than your typical harvested agave. They got those really high sugar levels there, and then they sourced piñas that were less sweet, a little more, going to hold a little more of the vegetal feel, a little more of the earthy mineral feel, and they sourced those. They took those, combined them to create this artisanal Blanco. Now it's limited edition. When I say that, we're talking anywhere between 5130 bottles and 6,000 bottles. Okay, the artisanal Blanco, there was 6,000 of it created. And now we're going to talk about what they did with it. They took that Blanco and they sourced specific barrels of, well, ex-bourbon barrels, or in a rye in this case, from Buffalo Trace Distillery. They got with master distiller there, Harlan Wheatley, and he gave them some Buffalo Trace bourbon barrels to age in. He gave them some George T. Stagg barrels to age in, wonderful bourbon. Some Old Rip Van Winkle, we're talking the pappy stuff, to age this one in. And finally, Sazerac Rye barrels to even age in this one. Now, since this is a first in the tequila industry, they had to be very careful with it because they weren't sure, how those barrels were going to influence the tequila. Are they going to overpower it too soon? So they had to check them every 2 months to see how they're progressing. And in the Buffalo Trace bourbon barrels, they only gave it 10.5 months. So it's a Reposado. Okay, 10.5 months. Bang, that's what you got here. The George T. Stagg, now that's a big, big bourbon. So they only aged it 22 months and got this fantastic Añejo. Okay, the the Old Rip Van Winkle, they got 23 months out of. And then finally the Sazerac Rye needed 24 months to get the richness and the spiciness out of that rye barrel. Now we're going to go ahead and nose them and taste them. Wow. The one thing on this Reposado, this is the Buffalo Trace barrel aged Reposado. When you first put it up to your nose, it feels like a really nice Reposado tequila. You get a lot of the rich, kind of an herbal, earthy agave note. A lot of mint. You don't really immediately go, oh, that's aged in a heavy bourbon barrel. But then when you look a little deeper, then you start getting the vanilla. That oak, that bourbon oak coming through. A little bit of caramel and a little bit of fruitiness in here as well in the nose. It just feels like a good Reposado in that, you're typically ex-bourbon barrels. But in this case, you're getting a little more vanilla, a little more caramel in it. And also the fruits are showing up a little better on the nose. All right. George T. Stagg. This is Añejo. Now, I can definitely tell that this one is in a bigger bourbon barrel because it feels almost split in that you get the agave, but it's not as fresh as it was here. There is a little mint. There's a little cinnamon. Also a good amount of strawberries, raspberries, maybe some cherry note, and a little bit of even cedar in that one. That's typically what I would find in the George T. Stagg, but you're getting it into the agave, the tequila here, so really, really nice there. All right, the Old Rip Van Winkle aged Añejo as well, 23 months. Wow. Not as big and bold with the bourbon note as this one was. It's actually fairly soft. You do get a little more citrus on this one. A lot of vanilla. caramel. The agave is a little better represented than it was here. The mint's still there. And some fruits as well. Some red fruits are showing up. Okay. Finally, the Sazerac Rye. I don't think this has ever been done before, so we're going to see how this noses. Wow. It's really nice. Cinnamon nutmeg coming off right off the top. There is sweet vanilla in here. Nice agave, mint. So that agave and that mint, that fresh agave and mint, pretty much holds true throughout the line. It gets a little bit covered up here. But in this one, the spice note, the spiciness on the nose is more evident. And maybe a little more floral as well. Okay, let's get to the actual tasting. Alright, Buffalo Trace. On the Buffalo Trace, there's 5,700 of this guy released, okay? Wow. That is a great Reposado. You do get the agave. You do get that mint that's showing up on that nose right up front. Very smooth and soft. A little bit of spice on the mid palate. But it doesn't kick very hard on that mid palate. The cinnamon kind of lays in on top of the agave and the mint. A little bit of vanilla underneath, like a vanilla extract, but very, very light. Some fruits and maybe some nuts on the finish, and the fruits being more like a plum or like a raspberry. Okay, that's what I get on that one. Overall, a great Reposado. Alright, we're moving on to the George T. Stagg. Aged Añejo. There's 5,430 of this one being released. Wow. That one's very, very different. Because the agave is not as rich up front, the mint's there. The agave starts showing up at the mid palate, but initially you just kind of get like a more of the oak influence than the caramel a little bit, and then the agave kind of peeks through, and then the mint comes through. Now in the mid palate's where you notice those. On the finish, I'm getting the tobacco that you would typically find on George T. Stagg. I'm getting that on the finish. Fair amount of cinnamon arriving with the agave and the mint in the middle. An undertone of like a hearty oak is laying throughout. And finally, just before that tobacco, there's a kind of like a bitter chocolate as well. As far as it being fruity, again, I feel more like stone fruit, so like a plum. It doesn't feel very light. It feels a little heavier on the fruit note. So really heavy dark plum. Maybe like a very, very light cherry in there as well. Alright. Pappy. This is the 23-month-old. And there was 5,370 of the old Rip Van Winkle aged Añejo. that one's really nice. Perfect balance here. The agave and mint right up front, very soft, creamy, and then you get that barrel influence, the oak, the vanilla, the caramel coming through. Right in that mid palate. Yep. There's also a fair amount of citrus, almost like a little bit of lemon or grapefruit zest in there as well. And yeah, the cinnamon spice kicks up right on that middle. Doesn't get overwhelming or feeling too hot. It does feel a little warm. And as far as the finish, it's the mint, the agave, the fruits, the oak. No tobacco like this one. Very, very, very nicely done on that one. Alright, Sazerac Rye. 5,130 of this guy. This one's aged 24 months. Oh wow. The other thing about this guy is it's 90 proof. The rest are 80. Wow. That imparts a ton of spice, a ton of floral notes. You do get the agave, you get the mint, but there's also this big perfumey floral thing going on as well. There is some vanilla lingering. A fair amount of oak as well. But it's that floral spice that's complementing that agave. It's making it very, very unique. Touch of citrus in this one as well on that finish. Wow. But overall, that's a great añejo as well. For the line, my favorite is going to be either the Sazerac Rye barrel aged or the Old Rip. Another great complement to the tequila that's being aged in those barrels. George T. Stagg, I like it. It's just, I feel maybe the bourbon influence is just a little too much in this case. But I do love George T. Stagg, so I can appreciate it. You just have to be prepared for, this isn't the full agave feel on this one. The Buffalo Trace Reposado feels like a good Reposado should. Very light, very fragrant, and full in the agave and mint. And that's going to be it for this review. Thank you for joining me once again. Everybody leave those great YouTube comments, and I know that Google Plus is being kind of a little monster right now, but we're going to get through it. So everybody have a good evening, and cheers.